Now, Cordae recently made a little confession. I want to talk about something Cordae said the other day about his most recent project, From a Bird's Eye View. With that being said, let's talk about it. Now, Cordae, I think most people are familiar with the name at this point. Cordae is of course a 24-year-old rapper out of Maryland who blew up back in 2018 with that 1985 remix. Back then, he was a part of the YBN Collective. A couple years later, they ended up splitting up, and ever since then, Cordae has been rocking out solo dolo. Going solo greatly benefited Cordae's career for sure. Personally, I never saw a future where he would eventually be thriving to this extent had he still been in the YBN Collective. YBN to me was more a collective of convenience rather than passion. Also, all three of them were kind of doing their own thing, which means they were all headed in different directions. This statement holds a lot of weight when Cordae comes up in a conversation as it relates to YBN. I think he just had a different kind of drive, to be honest. Cordae was going 100 miles per hour off the rip, while the guys weren't going as hard as him. That eventually led to him cutting ties, and here we are today. Like a lot of people already know, earlier this year, specifically on January 14, Cordae released his sophomore album, From a Bird's Eye View. This project was of course the follow-up to The Lost Boy, which dropped over 2 years prior in 2019. The Lost Boy was a solid body of work, that's for sure. Looking back on his project now, it did age pretty nicely. I think it sounds way better now than it did back then. I don't think this album got as much love as it should have gotten when it got released back then. The biggest reason for this, obviously Cordae wasn't as poppin' as he is right now. He was a fresh face in the game when that dropped. Also, there weren't a lot of expectations for him to live up to since he was a new artist. People just didn't know what to expect from him, so I think that played a part in the positive reception the project ended up getting. From a Bird's Eye View, however, at least in comparison to The Lost Boy, was met with some negative feedback. There's a couple reasons for this, which I'll talk about in just a second. But first, let's take a look at what Cordae said the other day. So Cordae made a little statement the other day. It was a tweet, so not a full-on statement, but on his tweet, he had something to say about his most recent album, From a Bird's Eye View, and this is what he said. Yo, so I just drove on a little 4-hour road trip and listened to both of my albums, front to back, and fuck, I must say, it's most definitely The Lost Boy over From a Bird's Eye View, LMAO. My bad, y'all. I'ma do better next time. I got something to prove. So a very surprising stance from Cordae. This is definitely not something you see too often, meaning rappers owning up to their perceived L. And I say perceived because I don't really think Cordae took an L with his album. He just didn't go as hard as he could have. Simple. Obviously, Cordae has been paying attention to the reception of the album. All artists do, no matter what they say. There's been a lot of different opinions floating around about Cordae post From a Bird's Eye View. One of the biggest things being he's a blander version of J. Cole. Those kinds of comments. I think that perception of Cordae is probably the most prominent one, considering the fact that J. Cole is the closest thing to Cordae's music. My stance on that comment is I don't think Cordae is a blander version per se, but he's just a less skilled version. Cordae is just not as sharp lyrically, right? He also doesn't have as much personality as J. Cole had when he was at Cordae's age. I think for Cordae, he's also struggled a little bit with the identity aspect of him as a rapper. You know, what exactly makes him different from the next lyrical rapper in his particular lane, and what exactly separates him from the pack. That's definitely something a lot of people have been bringing up, especially after From a Bird's Eye View. Cordae's talent and potential shined extremely bright when he was a part of YBN due to the contrast between him, Namir, Almighty J, but I think he stopped shining as hard when he left that situation, because now he's not being compared to the guys he came up with who, to be quite honest with you, don't really even have a fraction of the skill he has anyway. Now he's being compared to the rest of the game, which consists of a bunch of rappers who do have a leg up on Cordae as far as the rapping aspect. Obviously it depends who we're talking about. The point I'm trying to make is Cordae's not the best rapper out there, at least yet. Like he himself said, he's still got something to prove, which is understandable since he's only 24 years old. At least I'm happy that Cordae's taken on a challenge of dropping an even better body of work. Not only is he taking on that challenge, but he's also holding himself accountable by announcing it to the world, which I think goes for something. Kind of tells me that Cordae is in it for the long haul. He's not in it to satisfy his rapper ego by not owning up to the fact that he could have went harder. He's doing the opposite by saying, you know what, this album wasn't as hard as my last one, and I know I could do better. Watch me work. Very refreshing to hear this from a young rapper of Cordae's caliber. Usually in these cases what we see is rappers making a bunch of excuses and complaining about how people didn't appreciate their album because they're not listening. And it's kind of ironic how a lot of times the rappers who say stuff like that are usually the ones who aren't even saying shit in their records. Cordae's taking a different approach by putting the responsibility on him, which I like. And for the record, I don't think Cordae took an L with his album. I think From a Bird's Eye View was actually a good project. Cordae's pen game improved slightly. I also think he sounded a little bit more mature. He sound a little bit more grounded in who he's becoming as an artist, which is a step up from the Lost Boy. However, the gap in quality between these albums though isn't all that much, and that's something Cordae is well aware of, judging from, what he said. That aside, I'm excited for what Cordae does next. He does have a lot of eyes on him right now, so the burden of performance is on his shoulders. All he really has to do at this point is put his head down, work, and make sure he delivers a project that even his biggest critics can't help but listen to. But yeah, Cordae makes a little confession. Any thoughts on what Cordae said? What do you guys think about the fact that he's holding himself to a higher standard by saying, you know what, my last shit wasn't as hard as the one before that, and for the next one, I'll make sure I go harder. Do you guys agree with Cordae that The Lost Boy was better than From My Bird's Eye View? And also, just overall, Cordae as a rapper, where do you rate him as far as placement in the game? Curious to hear what you have to say, so yeah, definitely let me know in the comment section below. Like this video, like this video, like this video. Let's talk about this.